Get away. Get away. Get away, Chili Jordan. I wanna cross over and see my Lord. Yeah, get away. Get away. Get away. Oh, Chili Jordan, wanna cross over and see my Lord. Well, you know, I promised the Lord if He would set me free, well, I'd go until I find out what the end might be. Well, you know, one day, I was walking along, yeah. I heard a voice, but I saw no one. The voice I heard sounded so sweet, child. It came down from the crown of my head to the soles of my feet. Well, get away. Get away. Get back, Chili Jack. Wanna cross over to see my Lord. Well, you know, one of these days, and it won't be long, you're gonna look for me, I'll be gone. Yeah, just a few more risings and setting of the sun. This old battle fought and a victory won. Well, you know, friends I used to love so dear, they gone on to glory and left me here. My feet get cold. my eyes shut. Yeah, my body's been chilled by the hand of death. The tongue glued to the roof of my mouth, folded hands across my breast. You don't have to worry about the way I felt. Sonny man told me he'd be right there. Yeah, my buddy Wings of Love, carrying my soul to heavens up above. They tell me Jordan is deep and wide, but I told my mother I'd see her on the other side. Get away. Get away. Oh, get back. Chili Jack.
This song is called Asynchronous Ontology for Dummies. Circles.
But I'm trying
Round it up.
to
Go.
learn the song.
There is no try. There's only do.
Well, I don't know about the meaning crisis. Left, right, black, white, or other vices. Which Jesus Christ is right, or if we're all saved. From my perspective, a proposition. Participate procedurally, running in circles, remembering body. We're in the age of decay. Symbolically speaking, the reapers are reaping. Them damn agriculture. Oh boy. Holy cannoli. Alright, we're getting there.
You wrote the song, sir. Please, sir.
I wonder if, from my perspective, the proposition, participate procedurally, running in circles, remembering body. We're in the age of decay. Symbolically speaking, the reapers are reaping. Oh, shish kebab.
Shish kebab.
You know, tips my fingers. They go. Not this one. Trying to go.
Here we go.
I don't know about the meaning crisis. Left, right, black, white, or other vices. Which Jesus Christ is right, or if we're all saved. From my perspective, proposition, procedurally learning, participate procedurally, running in circles, remember everybody, we're in the age of decay. Symbolically speaking, the reapers are reaping, and agricultors are whispering sweetly, we're all in pursuit in the belly of the beast. Red pill, blue pill, red pill, mushroom, venom tea. Red and blue pill, got one and number two. We're all the same damn thing. So clean your room, repent on sin. Ontology for dummies, the bird's eye view. And if you really knew, could you really say? Red pill, oh. Yeah. All right. I think I should be done with that because my fingers are
All my
being
fingers and
bitches.
toes.
Straight up bitches.
Even the sparrow finds a place by your altar. even the wanderer who roams, even the fatherless is embraced by the Father. We're coming home, coming home. We're coming home, coming home. Even the sparrow finds a place by your altar. Even the wanderer who roams, even the fatherless is embraced by the Father. We're coming home, we're coming home, we're coming home, coming home. The table is set, I will sit down, surrounded by friends and feast. The table is set, we will sit down, surrounded by friends and feast. Even the sparrow finds a place by your altar. Even the wanderer who roams, even the fatherless is embraced by the Father. We're coming home, we're coming home, we're coming home, coming home, we're coming home, we're coming home, we're coming home, we're coming home, coming home. The table is set, we will sit down, surrounded by friends.
That song was written by the older guy with the instrument, and that was played at the Synod worship service at Synod 2025, right before the service. And I was hoping it would be recorded, and it was. And at some point, I'd like to make contact with the author and see if he's or with the musician and see if he's got some other stuff, because and that particular song, I was sitting in the audience, and when I heard it, I thought, wow, this would really be helpful in terms of our domicide and our meaning crisis, and sort of set a table for estuary. I often get the question about how people get on this panel that I do most Fridays. The answer is pretty simple. You have to be in the channel membership. You can be the lowest possible. That's $3 a month or free. It's often the case that on live streams, people will gift members to the channel. And so even if you don't have $3, you can get in that group. And why do I do it that way instead of just putting it out to the open internet? There's some good reasons for that. But I want to reward people who like to support this. $3 a month is not a lot. And often you can get it for free. I just gave 5 free ones right before I started the live stream. And often some really wonderful people like Rick from Texas and Ups from Cyprus, they'll often give 50. And so a good percentage of the people in the membership section have paid, there's Rick, have paid zero money to be on the live stream. And what I do is I just drop a link towards the end of the week, usually Wednesday or Thursday, and then the first 5 people to sign up get on. So it's not going to come to you. You're going to have to show a little bit of diligence, but I haven't been doing a lot of pure randos conversations. I have a couple in the queue right now, and about half of the randos conversations don't actually get recorded because people just want to have a pastoral conversation. So, oh gosh, you guys. So there's absolutely no excuse. If you want to get if you want to get a membership, they're all there right now. Thank you both. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Ups. So 105 free memberships have gone in today. And so you don't even have to be quick to get it. So, and today actually we have 3 freshmen, 1 sophomore, and 1 regular in today. So I'm going to bring let's see, which way do I usually do it? Yeah, freshman first. And this individual, I didn't even recognize his name. And so Ranfy Leonardo, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, Paul. So where do I start? I was born in Passaic, New Jersey, so not too far from Patterson, St. Mary's Hospital.
Wow.
Yeah. So my parents are both from the Dominican Republic. So yeah, I lived there till I was 13 and moved down to Georgia, Sewanee, and then moved up to Boston. Moved back down to Georgia, and I'm currently in Hood River, Oregon, for a month on paternity with my wife and 2 kids.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Ay, un dominicano.
Yeah.
Wow. So, how did you find this whole menagerie?
Yeah, well, it's been, I've been, as they say, a lurker. I think like a lot of other people, it's been through Jordan Peterson quite a while ago. I remember watching him back in, TVO on the agenda with I think Steve, I can't remember his name, but back in 2014, and I thought, well, this individual says some interesting things, and given the background that I have and what I've thought in the past, it was he challenged me, and so it kind of just grew to continue to watch him, and then I found you, and I was like, wow, someone else who sees it, who can see it, and so you kind of get that internal validation when you find someone who's reacting, and it's like, oh, it's clicking in the same way. And then obviously you're introduced to everybody else, Path Joe, Vervaeke, et cetera, so on and so forth. So
Wonderful. Well, thank you for jumping on this morning and coming out of the lurk. I've been thinking about making medallions for those who come out of the lurk, but or something like gaming achievement thing, something like that. But haven't figured that out yet. Yeah. All right, now we have 2 other freshmen here. Neither are unknown to me, so I'm going to bring in Dawn next. Dawn, introduce yourself.
Hello, Paul. So I'm living in Winnipeg. I am a mother of 4, grandmother of 3, brand new retired elementary music teacher. Wow. So feeling the freedom here in September. And charismated into the Orthodox Church a year ago, after a long journey from a very, very Puritan home church kind of thing. And my parents are Jamaican. I was born in Montreal, but grew up in Toronto. And I'm here through the same Peterson-Pajot pipeline. So, and I love your thumbnails, because every time I see your thumbnail and it's got a person that the branch, the web is just spreading over the whole world, gathering people in. It's so exciting to see. So every time I see, oh yes, another one of my favorite podcasters has been drawn in. I noticed he started talking about Konstantin Kisin and that whole set too. And it's just like, yes, the web is growing. So it's very exciting to be a part of this, even as a fly on the wall, just watching the conversations, participating when I can, but just seeing this wonderful, wonderful thing grow in the world.
Thank you, Dawn, and thank you for grabbing a link and getting to be on today. I love new people in the mix, and our 3rd freshman. He's not a freshman completely, because he's been on Mark's, and if you haven't listened to Mark's Rick tell his story on Mark Parker's channel, you really have to listen to Rick's story, because it's a really amazing story. So, but this is the first time you're in for the estuary things, at least on this channel on a Friday. So welcome, Rick.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah,
Anything you want to say to introduce yourself?
I'm coming to you from the Oregon coast near Newport, Oregon. So Ranfy is close to me in Hood River. Yeah, I sort of got started in the corner, sort of the Peterson pipeline. I was always interested in debates between religion and science. So I saw Peterson debating Harris. What's his first name?
Sam.
Sam Harris. And I thought that was really interesting. Peterson did a good job. But I have to say, I don't have much interest in Peterson. And then I'm basically a liberal Christian, a progressive Christian. And I attend a United Church of Christ, UCC church in my area. And let's see, I have 2 kids, I'm married, and I went surfing yesterday. I'm 76. I should call it paddling because I don't do much surfing. I'm out there. That's me.
All right. All right. Thank you, Rick, and thank you for coming on. The second to last person I'll bring in is a sophomore. Jason has been on the channel before, Ray's CRC. I'm actually able to say his last name in sort of the Dutch American way, which is Jonker. So I imagine a lot of people look at it and say Jonker, or there's not a lot of sounds like that. So and you go by Resilient Recovery, and you've talked about that a little bit. But why don't you introduce yourself a little bit, Jason?
Sure. Yeah, I'm probably the only person on this particular live stream that has actually danced in wooden shoes. So, pretty Dutch, yeah. But yeah, I live here in Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm essentially a chaplain out here. And I think I found your channel probably through the Peterson pipeline, and it was cool to see a CRC pastor. And then you were from New Jersey. My Frisian grandmother was born in New Jersey, but then migrated to Grand Rapids. You were in the Dominican Republic, so you speak a little bit of Spanish. My wife's Mexican, so if I want to eat, I better speak Spanish. So there was just all these little, and I think we buy our shirts from the same boring white guy store. So yeah, it was kind of cool.
Yeah, I have 5 of these shirts because it was like once you find a shirt, it's like, all right, I'll get a few of them that way.
Decision fatigue, man. I don't.
That's right.
Yeah.
Plus the stripes and the plaids, they sometimes kind of mix with the camera. So the last guy I'm going to bring in here is a very well-known face in the corner, good old Mark D. Parker, and from the House of Woo, and he did a great conversation with Rod Hare, who's also a regular. So Mark, I don't know if you don't need much introduction, but you want to say a thing or two about yourself?
I'm just here because I'm here to stalk you, Paul, and
all right. Well, that's okay, Mark. You can stalk me all you want. That's fine.
Okay.
All right. Those of you who don't know how this little estuary game is played, we have just completed the first round, which are introductions. The second round is pitch. Each of the people on the panel, unless they pass, are going to pitch an idea to the group. They're going to put it on a virtual imaginary table, and it can be something intellectual, can be something contextual, can be something personal, can be something estuarial. And they'll give that idea to the group, and it'll sit on this virtual table. And we all have to listen very carefully, because the next round is pointing, where each of us will point to an idea that someone else has pitched. And from there, I'm going to sort of tally up sort of what a majority of the group has pointed to, and that's where our conversation is going to begin. And we're probably going to go until maybe half before the not really ending hour, but and then I'll probably let in some other randos into the estuary. So Ranfy, you are the first, and you are a freshman, and so you get to throw the first pitch. What do you have on your mind?
Oh, what do I have on my mind? I've thought about this probably too much. And now I feel like I don't really have anything. It's funny. You want to say everything, but you can only say something.
Yep.
And I guess that's kind of what I want to. It's a good segue because want to kind of go back to a conversation that you had with Greg in regards to the Peterson debate, and it has to do with just that, which is the principle of polysemy and paradox, and how we sometimes misdiagnose someone as being ambiguous and obfuscating, when in fact they're gesturing, they're being paradoxical because they're gesturing at something that's deeper, right? And so I think in a lot of ways, that's what's going on in the individual relationships, whether it's with me and my wife, for example, when we talk past one another, at the familial level, and right now at the national level. We're, in that conversation, it wasn't really about whether God exists per se. It was more so, how do you discuss the sacred without flattening it? And so that's, I don't know if it's a question, as more as how do you embody that spiritual reverence? I don't think Peterson did embody it very well. It's poorly embodied, poorly timed, but it was genuine. And I think Greg missed it. He did nail something real, which is Peterson sort of oscillates. And so, but that can be, depending, I think it can be misperceived as polysemy, but the orientation matters. And so I use that as an example. I mean, we could take that and frame it over everything. What's happened this week, what I've seen on the internet, when people are discussing the tragedy that we've seen this week, how we're having these discussions and how we're embodying it. So I don't know if there's a question per se, but maybe a reaction to that.
Okay. Well, it's a pitch. It doesn't have to be a question.
All right.
But it's just kind of putting something on the table. So that's a fine pitch. Dawn, would you like to pitch something?
Sure. And I guess maybe it comes from a conversation I had with a friend yesterday, and also an opportunity to point to this little button, which says Thunder Bay 2022. And underneath it says The Symbolic Babes. And that is a group of women who met at the Thunder Bay, the first and most and really wonderful Thunder Bay conference. That's where I met you, Paul. And we started a book club doing Mathieu's book, and we're still going all these years later. So we just did this for fun, but I just thought I'd mention that because I'm so thrilled about that. So something to do with community, because I have many friends who've gone to subsequent either estuary meetings or symbolic world gatherings, and they all feel what we felt in Thunder Bay, which is that remarkable sense of community and connection, and that something more than just the material was growing in a material way. So I thought of the idea of community, but also how Pajot talks about, of course, unity and multiplicity. And my discussion with my friend yesterday, I was just saying again how I felt such compassion for young people today who are even on the dating scene, completely secular, not able to get to that point of community in any real sense. So I guess just coming out of my feeling of care for the young people of today, and many, not just young people, but it seems to be most vivid in that particular group, the idea of connection. And I know with Estuary, what we're doing right now, connection, community online, and discussions of how that really works better when you know the person in person first and can continue that live experience of touch, feel, smell. online, but it doesn't work so well the other way if it starts online. So I guess it's a very, very broad, very general, but just kind of thinking of that conundrum today. And I know you talked about it at the Westuary, that conference was all about that too, and the previous one. So I guess that's still on my mind when I think of young people specifically. And just, I don't know, what we can do as parents, brothers, sisters, uncles, to just embody that sense of connection that goes beyond the material and the visible.
Okay. Just finishing. Rick, are you there? Your camera is off and your mic is muted, and you might have stepped away.
Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you.
Can't see me?
Can't see you.
I'm going to switch my camera.
Okay.
How about now?
Well, we see a picture of you.
Yeah.
But you can go
sometimes
ahead and pitch and then sort that out as we go too. That's fine.
Yeah, sometimes I have trouble with my iPad. Mark can vouch for that. My pitch is the First Amendment freedom of speech that we have, which includes protected hate speech, good for our culture. Or would it be better if it was more like Canada, where they have freedom of speech, but hate speech is monitored and not protected?
All right. Thank you, Rick. Jason, what would you like to pitch?
Sure. So I'm a former therapist, and I ran mental health clinics, and now I'm a chaplain, and I've been pretty down, I guess, on therapy and therapy culture and how it's invaded the way we think and talk. But I saw the conversation between Rafe Kelly and Paul and Leitner, and therapy figured heavily into Rafe Kelly's conversion. And so I guess the intersection of psychology and religion and the limits of either, and something in that kind of area.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mark D. Parker.
As you know, I'm a bit obsessed with the fruit of the Spirit right now, and but one specific one, and I'm referring to Galatians 5. And but there's one in the list. I guess I probably should read the list real quickly just so everyone makes sure I get it right here. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. Paul wrote this to the Galatians, and you can find it in chapter 5, verses 22 and 23. I'm very interested in talking about self-control, because it's a very interesting virtue when you think about it. It's not doing what you want to do, and to do what you know needs doing. And in these times, it seems like it's a good thing to meditate on, because there's the demand on the churches and the demand on people to not do what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Big deal.
All
so that's
right.
my pitch.
All right, good. All right, those are the pitches. I will pass. There's plenty on the table. And so now with this round, you point. Now with your pointing, you can I thought everybody pitched well, because sometimes people sort of respond to what was pitched previous to them, and that's not really a pitch, that's hitting. Now, in a sense, you point to what someone else has pitched, and it's legitimate to sort of connect it to other pitches, if you will. But let us know why what that person pitched sort of connected with you. So, Ranfy, what would you like to point to?
I think I'd like to point to Rick and the freedom of speech. I think that's a good kind of portal jump off point. I think that's and in light of this week, I think it's probably a good starting point. So yeah, I think that's you can scaffold a lot to that. So
Okay.
that's where I want to start.
All right. Thank you, Ranfy. Dawn, what would you like to point to?
Therapy versus morality or philosophy. That I think is a very fundamental issue in our culture today. And since there are a couple of people talking about culture and politics, I think that also would be a good grounding. That split now between therapeutic or moral.
All right. Rick, what would you like to point to?
Can you see me now?
No.
Oh, shoot.
Well, we know it's you.
Okay. Before I point, could I just get a definition of polysemy?
Ranfy, you'd like a definition of polysemy.
So polysemy, I mean, I can just look it up, but it's basically
What did you mean by it?
well, what I meant was it's not anything that holds, it separates, right? So it's I think it's more akin to performative contradiction. So I think the way Greg meant it, and what I think the way it's meant is single word carrying multiple related meanings. So it's how language is flexible.
Which Greg are you speaking about now? Is there a particular
Oh, so
video?
sorry. The Greg from the conversation you had with the Greg who's on the Jubilee debate against Jordan Peterson.
Oh, okay. All right. Yep. Okay.
So I just want to make that distinction between polysemy and paradox.
Okay.
So that's kind of my point. Polysemy deflects, paradox holds.
Okay. All right. Okay.
I'll go ahead and point to Ranfy.
Okay.
It's like how to have a dialogue instead of an argument.
Okay. Thank you. Jason, what would you like to point to?
To what Don was talking about with community, I think that relates a little bit to what I was talking about, where therapy is very individualistic, and you have professional relationships with people, whereas a church has these informal relationships that foster community. You can never get that sense of community really from therapeutic culture. So how do you form a culture and a sense of community and those kind of things?
Very good. Wow, our points are spread all over the map so far. Everybody's maybe that speaks well to the pitches. We'll see where we can find our way through. Mark, what would you like to point to?
I'm torn between Don and Rick. I'll go with Rick.
Okay.
Free speech.
Okay. All right. Boy, oh boy. So Rick, I think, has 2 votes. Dawn, I'd say, has 1.5 because Mark sort of put her below. I can see sort of a thread through here in terms of if we look at, let's say, Mark's self-control, which I think has a lot to do with speech. I can see Ranfy's idea of, because so much of what we're doing online is speech. His idea of the relationship between speech and embodiment. I see that very much in Dawn's pitch, forming communities, and I think Jason, brings in this question of the therapeutic, of the healing, and so I think we're probably sort of in that mix there. I think within Rick's pitch, there's this idea of criminality and government, let's say government use of violence, or at least violent threats against certain kinds of speech, which whenever you get into, let's say, the government's use of the sword, I mean, there's always implicit or sometimes explicit violence that the government uses to keep a degree of order and to facilitate community. And we know that because governments have to use, I mean, you could ask a question, is incarceration violence? It's certainly involuntary. So there's a lot of questions in there. So maybe we'll give Rick a chance to speak more. Rick, what do you think? Do you think violence is an answer to hate speech?
Never.
Okay.
No.
Do you think government's use of the sword used to involuntarily restrain, take away people's liberties, spend people's lives in prison? Do you think that is a viable tool to address hate speech?
There's different kinds of hate speech. Some of them may be criminal, like yelling fire in a theater. Others would be harassing certain racial groups or homophobia. And I kind of don't like the idea of the government being a sword. I would say more like rehab. But let me just say that when I first think about freedom of speech, I think, yeah, that's really what it should be. Everybody should have a chance to speak their mind, whether it's racist, homophobic, or whatever. But then when I think about it a little more, I question whether it's okay to have hate speech protected when it's destructive to the culture. And the problem is who's gonna watch over it. I mean, I'd like to say the government, but right now we've got a government that says if you stand up for the Palestinians, you're anti-Semitic. So it's very complicated. I don't really have an answer.
Okay. Is the goal, let me ask you this question. What in your mind should be the goal of speech? What is speech for?
A search for the truth.
Okay.
A process of connecting.
Okay. I think when you get into, I like Mark's pitch in terms of the fruit of the Spirit, and it's helpful to remember. And if you look on my Twitter bio, you'll notice that I actually make an implicit reference to the fruit of the Spirit. I want to major things because Paul says, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things, there is no law. And I always found that to be a really interesting observation on the part of the Apostle Paul, that even in a context considerably more violent than ours, in some ways, but not in other ways, potentially more consequential and restrictive than ours, he makes the observation that there are certain things that even the tyrants must employ for their tyranny to function. And I've always found that to be an interesting paradox, because a tyrant cannot function without loyalty. And loyalty is this virtue, because if a tyrant does not have loyal underlings, the will of the tyrant cannot sort of pass through and be popularly disseminated. And so part of, Paul also contrasts love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control with what he labels, and those other things are seldom less ran through, less. These are against the work of the Spirit. And so I think in many of the pitches today, what we have is a desire for, I'd say, certainly understanding, certainly truth, and I think also certainly shalom. And shalom is this Hebrew concept in the Old Testament of well-being, of peace, of rest, of, to one degree or another, harmony, where how good it is for brothers and sisters to live together in peace. So and we have a sense, I think, that speech, and there's always, speech is always difficult. And I notice this as a pastor, because I often have it that people will come to me, especially me, because I'm known to be fairly winsome and quite open and all of this. And they'll often come to me and say, Pastor, I really wish you would draw some hard lines and really major more on confrontation with the bad behavior that we see happening sort of within your realm. And I'll usually say, oh, that's what you'd like. Yes, Pastor, you really should do this. And usually I find that they're thinking about the speech of others. So then I'll say, shall I begin with you, with this posture that you propose is needed for the welfare of the community? And then they usually give me kind of a surprised look, because they were looking for me to do this with others. And then usually I'll say, well, as I examine how you've behaved in this community, these are the elements where I think you could probably stand to improve. And it isn't uncommon that that's the last conversation I have with that person for years. So we have this, and I think this gets into something of Ranfy's pitch, that we have this sense that we want to use language to build up. And there's going to be tensions. We're going to say things that hurt. And I'm sure if Peter, maybe at the end of the Gospel of John, before Jesus had done anything, when he figured out this, Jesus, I want this to be a safe place. Jesus, I don't want you to say anything that hurts my feelings. And Jesus says, Peter, do you love me? Then feed my sheep. So I think we have a sense that we have a sense that, like with many of the powerful tools we've been given, language is one of these tools that in some ways is beyond us, because it possesses great power. And we would love people to major with these fruits of the Spirit. That we use language for love, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, gentleness. But I love how Mark said, but the real tough one when it comes down to all of these things, we can all agree on so many of these things, but then it comes to self-control. And then it comes to this question of policing speech. Well, what we'd really like is for people to police their own speech. And when we don't think they are policing their speech well, what do we do then? How can I use speech to police speech? Or how can I use speech? I think this was getting in a lot at actually what Jason was talking about in terms of therapy. How can I use speech to heal? And then with Dawn's question, to produce community. What does that look like? Especially, I think, in a world, I've gone on way too long here, but I'll shut up in a minute. When I came to Living Stones, it was called Sacramento Christian Reformed Church. This church had decades of conflict. And as I got here and began talking to people and listening to people about the church, they wanted to introduce the church to me because I was new there. I'd hear about all these fights. This church fought about a lot of things. One of the first things I did, which people didn't know what I was doing, was I said, we usually have congregational meetings where we have all of the chairs in a row, just like we have for the sermon. And then usually what happens is that somebody stands up somewhere in the midst of these chairs and blasts with their language to the church. I said, we're not going to do congregational meetings that way anymore. We have all these movable chairs in Living Stones. We're going to put all of the chairs in circles so that when you have something to say, you're not going to say it to the backs of heads. You're not going to say it to straw men in your imagination. You're going to say it to people that you're looking eye to eye with. And you know what? That one little trick that I did of moving the chairs, it didn't solve everything, but it helped to change the community of the church. Actually, part of what it did was a bunch of people left the church. And they left the church because they had a certain degree of power saying bombastic things to the back of people's heads. And when I took that power away, and when they had to own with the eyesight of another person across the table with all of us sitting at the same level, all this psychology, they didn't dare say what they used to say anymore. And some of them would prefer to leave the community entirely than to stand up and throw bombs. That said something to me. And actually, after about a year, the church was a lot happier place. We weren't fighting about the color of the chairs. We weren't fighting about what committee had responsibility for what thing to do. And actually, someone might argue that the death of the church began with that motion. But for the last 26 years, it's been a happier place. So did I achieve something? I don't know. All right, I'll shut up. Have at it, people. Play.
So I think I'll jump in there. I tend to think I use a Trinity, for example, to kind of think about this. So you have the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, centralization, decentralized, and distributed networks. Kind of that's the analogy that I use. And how do you solve the trilemma? And so, and I think what you were gesturing at just now, Paul, with the horizontal differences, right? You didn't argue about the color of the chairs anymore because the vertical was in alignment. And I think with freedom of speech, if the frame, if the ontology, no one can agree on that vertical element, it's going to flatten to this horizontal. We're going to have these extremely petty and shallow differences and talking past one another when it comes to the everyday things, right? Because we're not willing to have the deep conversations, which is why you have channels like this and the TLC. So that's kind of what my thing is, what I think about it. And as far as speech, it's a tool. In a tool, you can have it. You can have the tool, and then it has you back, right? Words do that. So are you using the word as an idol or as an icon? And I think in modernity and post-modernity, the atmosphere that we're breathing in, and this happens to me all the time. It's probably happening right now. I'm saying things. I think that I'm being neutral, right? But I'm bringing in so much presuppositions into it that I'm not putting a light on. And part of it is because I can't say everything right now while I'm speaking and words are coming out of my mouth. I'm a limited human being, I'm not God. And so then the recognition of that is, well, so is someone else. And so how do you not reduce the person to their words, their statements? So what does it mean to be made in the image of God? It means very inexhaustible. And so it's unfair to do that to someone. It's not good faith to do that to people. Even the worst things that they say. Again, example this week, what I've been seeing on social media, reducing someone to clips, the worst things they said. When the people are much more complex than I don't know. Yeah.
I think part of that when I thought about the dynamic of the congregational meeting with one big group and people talking to the back of other people's heads, except the pastor who was standing in front. They had to look me in the eye, but I was new, so. And there's a connection to that with the internet, and now especially with social media. All it takes to have a platform is a free Gmail account, and if you're clever. And again, part of the difficulty that we have with the internet is we used to say with the evening news, the local evening news, if it bleeds, it leads. That's the more bombastic, the more skilled someone is at triggering a reaction, even from an opponent. These are the things that get pushed up the hierarchies, because it's an attention economy. And as many people have noted, that's an extremely destructive thing for community. Because as you said, Ranfy, then suddenly this girl that I see or this guy that I see making these noises that I hear, all they are is, and part of, and then I hear so-and-so is this, so-and-so is that. Is all they are a communist or a homophobe or a bigot or a capitalist or and in whatever valence any of those words have for anyone? Is that really all they are? Or are they also a son or a daughter or a mother, father? And, one of the things that I noticed in church, even in a confessional church, was that even in a group of 50 people, the range of opinions, according to the range of possible opinions, is combinatorially explosive. And to actually get a sense for, yeah, they're a communist, but I sure like how they treat my dog. Or they're a Christian, but boy, they can sure be an asshole. It's all over the map. And so then, the thing, I was listening to the Jordan Daniel Wood and the other guy, they're both going to be at South Estuary this morning. I was listening to them, and I was thinking about part of what's so challenging today is to find words that bless. And I was thinking about that Rafe was figuring out how to relate to his wife. And he learned, I got to shut up. My wife doesn't need to hear more words out of my mouth. My wife needs to see that I love her, and that's going to be done with actions. Sometimes silence, oftentimes generosity. And even though I desperately want to heal this mend, I can't control it. But for my part, I am going to love, and in that case, at that moment, even without words, which can usually only be done in person.
Mm-hmm.
I just like to respond briefly to Paul's church. I noticed that Paul provided the guidance. This is what we're going to do. We're going to go in a circle. So that's number one, which I agree with. We need guidance. And for what Ranfy said, the vertical agreement, I agree with that very much. What if you're not a Christian or whatever? Is there an ethical agreement? And then just one other quick thing. On the internet, we're like clickbait. It's like you can become famous by attacking other people. This is a huge problem, and it's going to get worse. Not to mention misinformation.
Yeah.
So If I could add to your church analogy, when I was a supervisor, people would sometimes bring me an email and they'd want to check to see if the tone of the email was okay. And I'd be like, yeah, you're calling that person. If you have to ask me if to check the tone of the email, you're either going to call them or you're going to sit down and have coffee. And I think free speech probably really is most effective if people are face to face and they have a community. I think one of the things with the internet, I don't think we've evolved to be able to discern who's full of crap and who's full of BS. So you can get in front of a camera and you can say some things and you can strike a tone or whatever, and people just see that video and they assume that it has this sort of validity, because it used to when we were on TV, it meant there was money and all these other things behind it, and we can't tell. If I actually sat down or I had to work with that person who's spouting that stuff right now, this would be a person who doesn't get their projects done, who's always trying to leave late, who's whatever, but you can't see what they're doing in their life. You just hear their cool hot take, and we haven't evolved to be able to discern that enough.
One of the things, I pastored during the rise of email, and one of the things we as pastors learned very quickly, actually we didn't learn it quickly enough, was that someone sends you a hot email from your church. There was one guy, Monday morning, I'd get the email, and
the nasty gram.
I was completely unfair, because even though I never mentioned his name, I was talking about his deficiencies in my sermon, and I should stop picking on him, and don't write me back. Okay. All right. But as pastors, we learned very quickly, once a certain level of conflict begins to emerge in your church, stop emailing people. Just stop it. Go and talk to that person in person. And sort of like the book of Matthew says, maybe you'll need to bring another person with you, and I think the truth is Zoom, it's a little better than email, but not much.
Can I jump in?
Please do.
Yeah. So I'm just hearing another little thread. It's kind of coming a little bit from Ranfy's vertical, horizontal, and the shallowness of horizontal when the vertical is not shared. And then a little bit related to Rick, free speech, and how quickly it can be confusing, the difference between free speech and violence, as if that isn't perfectly clear. You can get to the point where it is confusing. And then back to what I had pointed to before with Jason about the shift. And I saw his dichotomy between therapeutic and, did you say religious or just moral? But I think it's kind of this based on the same kind of things. Okay. Maybe distinction between interacting or living through the therapeutic model as versus the religious or ethical model. And so with all those things, it just seems to me like underneath all of that, and it was really helpful to me to just open up a little bit more of my understanding of what I see around me. Meaning to say, as Ranfy said, we bring our suppositions, and just being awakened to the suppositions. So going right back to Enlightenment separation of the religious and the public sphere, supposedly. Religion becomes a private matter, and then that long, slow road to religion being just your set of beliefs and my set of beliefs, and now it's all chaotic because there is no shared set of beliefs and worldview, especially as we see Christianity in decline in the West. So, Ranfy, you're talking about those shared values. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, as we lose those shared values that came, let's just say, from religion in our culture, right? Mm-hmm. As we lose those and things break apart, we are defaulting into that, what we heard about already, that radical individualism. My opinion's as good as your opinion, your truth, my truth. Mm-hmm. And I think that is what accounts for this massive growth of therapy, right? Where it is all radically individual. It is all radically self-actualization. my therapist is here to help me realize my potential and my, what I can be, my actuality. And there's no one, and again, breakdown of families and the dissolution of families as we spread out across the continent, from our extended families. So now our entire moral structure is based on the therapy model rather than the religious ethical model. And I'm sure you all know that, realize as well. So rather than saying, and we hear it all the time, that is bad. You cannot say that is good and that is bad. You have to say that's crazy or that's sick. When we talk about Hitler, we don't say he was evil, although evil has now just become to mean this. We don't say he was bad. We say he was really sick. So the word sick has replaced the word evil. We're not allowed to use religious terms because it's so anti-Christian right now in our general population, and openly so, but we can be just as morally outraged by someone who shows some psychological deviance that's not in our new list of fruit of the Spirit, our new secular list of fruit of the Spirit, the tolerance, the care, the compassion, that whole thing, that whole self-esteem thing, right? So I'm just thinking that we are caught now in this bubble, this therapeutic model of morality, and it's just not substantial enough to hold us together. Besides which, it's turning us all into narcissists, and there are many other factors too, of course, we know that. And it's making us, again, to Rick's point, almost incapable of seeing the other person, again, as a valuable human being. Rather, what they're saying makes me uncomfortable or goes across what I like, and they become a bad person, a horrible person, a sick person, an evil person, rather than someone else with a valid right to their own opinion, even if it differs to mine. So I just found it really useful to come into situations now, have more of an approach to seeking reality and seeking who people are and what people are around me. If I just have that at the back of my mind when I hear things like, that's sick or that's bad, or when I hear yearnings, I hear, like, again, the young people, I hear the yearnings, I hear them discrediting and dismissing things, or the idea that everything traditional is bad, the whole of Western civilization is bad. And that's not because it makes me feel bad, even though they know actually nothing about it in facts, right? So I just found that kind of a helpful way for me to start just shifting my perspective, understanding I have biases, but that we are just in the grip of this therapeutic model of ethics rather than religious, morally, ethically grounded, based on maybe biblical principles in our culture. But yeah, so I just throw that out there to consider.
Thank you.
Well, and how can you get that unity without some degree of force or restriction? Some way or another, something's going to have to put some walls up around things, and you're going to have to infringe on somebody's rights in order to have that unity. So how do you get to a place that's not?
Yeah, I don't know if I believe that. I think that if you get to a point where you're aligned vertically and you stand 10 toes in what you believe, that's enough. That's enough to invite people. I don't know. And you have to risk something. That's the thing. It can't be neat. It can't be clear. I think that's the problem with modernity and since the Enlightenment. We've worked so hard to collapse the paradox and to have answers to everything. We have to have answers. We have to be able to put things in boxes. We're uncomfortable with mystery. And we're uncomfortable with taking risk and risk being misunderstood. And I think if you just have faith and you stand and you truly integrate it, I think, and kind of see where the chips fall. If enough people do that, I think that can do it. That might be too idealistic, but I don't know.
I was going to say, Jason, in response to that I think every social group must have disincentives, must have barriers, circumference. And in most societies, in most stages of history, they have been enforced through force. But that force is part of an agreed upon, if you want to call it social contract or religious contract, an agreed upon contract, which is we all agree that if you do this, the state or the whatever force can enforce it with force, with coercion, for the sake of the group. But there has to be that agreement amongst the group that this response and this consequence is valid and agreed upon by everyone. But if you have that complete dissolution of the vertical or of the worldview, or if it's therapeutic where it doesn't feel good and there's not actually any standard moral justification on ethical grounds, rather than psychological grounds or psychological, then you cannot all have that agreement that Ranfy's talking about, that initial agreement that we agree to abide by these rules that we as a society or a group have formed for ourselves. And we agree that these are the consequences, whether they be violent or not. So I think there has to be that social agreement, whether it's religious. And I think we're finding out now in our modern age where they've said, oh, we don't need the religious and biblical rules. We can just, like the new atheists say, we can just make them up ourselves as rational, compassionate people. Well, we've kind of seen how that works. So I think that's an interesting question. What you're saying there is like, do not just shared values, but what are the basis of those values that can actually sustain that society when internal conflicts happen? And it has to be strong enough that everybody agrees. And that's what has actually is crumbling now, I think, as we speak around us.
So I guess I would look at marriage as a analogy, that we want our freedom. We would all agree that having the number of children growing up in non-intact families is not good for society. But how do we get to the agreement that we're going to go back inside this box? Because somebody's going to have to tough it out in a marriage that they don't want to in that moment. There's going to have to be some restriction on our own behavior, and nobody wants to line up and do it, even if they're looking at how bad it's been for society to just the sexual revolution and just the complete decimation of the family unit. Me individually, I don't want my choices restricted. And so how do we get back to a unity? Because we chomp it. We don't want to have bits and bridles. Yeah.
And marriage is, few of us would argue against the idea that a marriage creates a context, especially when children come, and that context is so important for the formation of the children. And then when you get back to self-control, and it's so if you sit down with an unhappy couple, they've both got lists of the other person's sins, and they're probably not wrong.
Yeah, well, love keeps no record of wrongs.
No, that's right.
But bad marriages sure do. Yeah.
And then at some point, the two people, and in most cases, there's no question of legality here. For example, in our culture, we have chosen to not criminalize adultery, even though adultery is an enormously destructive. And if we limit adultery to physical contact, well, that's one element. But then, of course, you can say, well, some such and such a relationship in this person's life is endangering the marriage, which may very well be true. So then in a context like that, it's, well, the state isn't going to imprison anyone here, but there are going to be consequences that everyone can understand. And you're not going to, often therapists that decide they're going to wade into couples therapy, a lot of therapists don't want to do that because it's a lot easier sitting with this one person in isolation from the family and saying, well, what would make you feel better? Well, if I would leave, or better yet, if he would leave. well, that maybe you should do that. But that therapist does not have the spouse and the children in their purview. And I've often noted that this is where pastors sort of differ, because pastor tends to be looking at the husband, the wife, the children, and saying, yeah, I really appreciate the fact that it's not much fun for you to be married to him or her right now. But you understand that your decision to break this union, and that gets broken down into the decision of, when they say one thing, what do you say? Self-control. Can I not, because it's just so easy to, they said something and that hurt me. And so we don't even think about it consciously. Then I'm going to react and try to score points for my side, points on some imaginary scoreboard. Well, tell me about that. Because generally speaking, if you slow it down and you ask them, why did you want to say that to that person? Because I hurt, and so I want them to hurt too. What does that say? And I think as a culture, we're just in the midst of that now.
And I would add to that, it's one reason not to throw out the therapeutic baby with the bathwater. That we are a profoundly emotionally traumatized culture at the individual level and larger. Whole communities of people feel put upon, damaged, injured, threatened, right? So there is a place for therapy work. There's also a place for immunization. I mean, finding a powerful intervention that is healing, that is maybe beyond therapy, and that would go into the spirit realm, God, religion. So, yeah, I because that hurt. That's what we're dealing with right now. And Vlad Vlexler, he's a philosopher with a big YouTube following, had a really good short commentary on the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And the point that he leads with is violence is the ultimate political taboo because it unhinges the society. It lets loose. It breaks us from our norms and the things that do restrain us. We lose self-control in response to it. And so it becomes a ping pong back and forth, recursively traumatizing event,
Could I go back to what you said the first about groups of people feeling hurt and feeling traumatized and put upon? I think one thing the therapeutic can never wrap its arms around is, not only so, but I glory in my suffering. Suffering produces perseverance, character, hope. And the therapeutic never sees the dignity and the ability of a human being to become more saintly and more Christ-like through suffering. It always sees suffering as something that I need to be soothed from. And that's not a great pathway to wisdom or maturity. You always have to be soothed. Sometimes, the Father punishes us and we don't like it in the moment, but it makes us better. And there's a dignity and a purpose and a sacredness to suffering that we've totally lost.
Well, and just a brief response to that, sometimes we do need a heart surgeon. If you're going to keep a patient alive, sometimes that patient needs a heart surgeon, or someone who could live to 75 dies at 55 if he doesn't get it right. Some traumas what is this, tell me, what is the sacred, I mean, I think you're talking about a kind of redemptive suffering there, right? Am I understanding you correctly? That if you can work through it, it can be redemptive? Well, what's the redemptive suffering of a 11-year-old girl who's been impregnated by her father?
Yeah. Well,
Right?
I think that's
some
only
things,
the cross can address something that deep.
but we are also called to bear each other's burdens. So the suffering I may take on upon myself voluntarily could be nothing more than carrying the load of someone who cannot bear it. And that can serve as therapy for them, but a deep, painful thing for me to have to endure. Expensive even, right? I mean, who knows? But
I just wanted to clarify too, because Mark mentioned throwing therapy out as baby out with the bathwater. I would agree that therapy is useful and good. What I was talking about is the therapeutic worldview, like approaching morality and interactions in a therapeutic worldview rather than a religious or ethical worldview. So although I would agree with you, we need to be heard. And if we have no one in our family, and again, that's a whole other thing, right? Who can listen to us, then we can pay a therapist to do that, right? And that's good. But what I was talking about is the distinction between therapy, how we approach the world, relationships, and morality through a therapeutic lens rather than a religious, ethical lens. Yeah, so I see there's a lot of overlap with what the two of you are saying, and they each have their predominant place. But I do think that there has been a split and we become subsumed in a particularly therapeutic worldview, which is what I was talking about. So I would never say, discard therapy at all, but just that be mindful when we're hearing people speak that often that's how they're actually viewing the world, through that lens. Yeah.
To me, the idea of therapy versus religion points to a situation that we have where science and religion have become separated, and I think that religion needs to embrace science, and science needs to embrace religion, so that it's like Jason, Resilient Recovery. His project might be to bring the idea of spiritual healing into the therapeutic world. And I know there's got to be lots of people doing that already. But this binary idea that we have to either be secular and therapeutic or religious is not helpful.
Aren't religion and science in many ways, if you understand religion to be that which is highest and how to seek it, science tends to obviously focus on the material aspect. And what I heard in Dawn's pitch was you can have no science can't really sort of part of the way science works is you remove the formal cause and the final cause. And so if you listen to a lot of what Mary Harrington's been working on, she's saying, looks like we're going to relitigate the 17th century. And what she means by that is you can't physically, it's becoming increasingly obvious that the physical layers, the efficient cause, is insufficient to actually give us everything that we want. Because even though there are a lot of efficient causes in terms of, let's say, a conference, when that group of people is together, that vertical is, science can't really deal with the vertical. It can, like the soft sciences, try to access it via testimony. But again, once you get into that testimony, you're depending on, in Vervaeke terms, the relevant realization of those people. And I think what we're seeing, it used to sort of be the assumption that human beings are functional animals. I remember I've told this story before. I visited this alligator farm in Florida, and there's this mammoth alligator just sitting in a little pool. And I thought, doesn't this thing get bored? And the guy said, nah, as long as you throw chicken at it every day, it'll sit there and just grow and live in that little pond forever. And I thought, that's interesting. We're not like that. We want something more. And we used to think, as long as everybody has enough food and adequate shelter, and then you have Dostoevsky's observation that you give everybody the food and shelter and the attempt to individually satisfy themselves sexually, that everyone will just sort of be okay. And Dostoevsky says the first thing they'll do when they get the chance is blow up the system. And we see that because we're living in an experiment of massive affluence. I mean, again, the affluence we appreciate today, the lack of violence that we have, that so many of us have in our surroundings. I mean, just go to the Dominican Republic, go to Haiti. We have it great. There's reason people want to get here. I totally get it. But we're really weird because we want more. And instead of someone just saying, whap, 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 well, they're stepping on our sacred cows and we want them stopped. And the interesting thing that I think, when I was thinking about what Mark was talking about, what murder does, an assassination, it robs people of their future. And what's so interesting to me is I look at these two sides, and if I would ask the one side, what do you really want? I want the other side to see the world the way I do. Great. In terms of your knowledge of human beings, is it most rational and reasonable to try to pursue that by yelling at them and shaming them and insulting them? Is that the most reasonable course to gain influence so that they see the world like you do? Or what might be some other things on the table that, and again, we sort of do that, but it's really telling that the people that it's hardest to do sometimes are the ones that only a few years earlier you stood on front of a stage and told the whole world that you love this person more than anybody else in the entire world. And that's the person you hate. So we are a mess.
In my metaphysic, I believe in God, the creator. God created everything, the material world. God in quantum physics is entangled in matter. We are matter. We're inhabited. Matter and spirit are two sides of one coin. So science is excellent at measuring matter, measuring God's creation. Been very successful at creating the internet, what we're doing right now. What comes into play is the need for philosophy to bridge science and spirituality. So that
what spirit created the internet? When we created the internet, and as we're continuing to create it, what are we creating it for? What do we want from it?
We're creating what Teilhard de Chardin called the noosphere, the global mind. And that's why we all need to speak into it to achieve the highest level of love, shalom, that we can.
Why love?
Because that's what God is, love. I want to be like God. God is love.
Is materiality love?
Absolutely. If God withdrew herself from the creation, you'd disappear. That's
so then
love.
God is distinct from the creation. The creation could exist without?
No, God is part of it, but God created it. I mean, you got a paradox there. I'm a panentheist. God is within everything, and everything is within God, but God is also infinitely more than all of that.
It's interesting how and why we bump down to the religious layer, because the religious layer is all about the ultimates, and we have this intuition that without getting that layer correct, no matter how much money, how much sex, how much food, it's not going to. And then the word that we use there is incredibly interesting. It's not going to matter.
Well, that's interesting. I think this is reacting to Rick and what he's saying. Pantheism. Is that I think that's the more interesting conversation that needs to be had. How to define what is God? My view is that he's separate from creation. So I think, is it Trinitarian? Is it, mono? Yeah. So I think that's a kind of an interesting conversation to have, because that sets the frame for everything downstream. Well, we can't even get there sometimes. So I think it's important to try to get there. But yeah, I think as far as the therapeutic and science, and I think it's, again, I always go back to the frames and the ontology. I think obviously everything has to be nested. Like science is nested inside of a structure that's bigger than it. It's a tool like anything else. It's like, it's like building a house and being thankful for the hammer, as opposed to the creator, right? And again, this is why it's probably important to have a conversation about whether God is pantheistic or not. It's a triune, because if it's pantheistic, if everything's God, then downstream, does that risk you conflating and wanting to be God, turning yourself into an idol? And this is where I think nowadays, not to get too much on a tangent, but New Ageism, right? And
yeah, Ranfy, I did say panentheism, not
okay.
pantheism.
I apologize, I misheard you.
No, I just wanted to clarify. And, I think you're right. I mean, that's a huge conversation that I'd like to have, but it's kind of off the track. But yeah, it's like, oh, go ahead. Somebody else talk.
How do we know when a community is good?
The law is written in our hearts. Okay. God is love.
Good, Mark. Yeah.
This is where it gets really tricky, because there are communities out there that freak me out, man. They scare the hell out of me. Okay? I mean, there's a big thing out there. It's like this growing movement of building intentional communities around, hold on to your strap in, guys, around Christian white nationalism. Ethnocentric. And they really believe this stuff. I mean, they really believe it. But then, now they soften a little by saying, we're not out here to tell you folks who aren't like us, we're not a threat to you, but we want to live by our own kind as we define it. And it's a very much a, I don't even know if you can hearken it back to anything quite in American history. I mean, because it's intentional. It's aggressively segregationist, but it's a self-cloistering and a shutting themselves off from the outside world. And it's being embraced by young people. I'm sorry?
Ethno-Amish.
There you go. Now, on the outside, I've seen reporters come in and really go in depth with this and look at what they're doing. The outside it looks really sweet. You know, the girls in the peasant dresses and they're doing stuff, and they're all the men are out there all strapping young men, building barns or whatever they're doing. And it looks very nice and very sweet and very appealing. And there is, quote, love there, but it's internal. Dare I say, it might even call it incestuous, but it's love. There's a love. There are bonds. There's kindness. There's sharing. There's virtues. But is it one that I would consider? Is that kind of love I want to spread? Not me. Now the problem is we live in a world where we have different definitions of what is truly meaningful and loving, and some people say, if to shut that down, well, boy, you're really infringing upon that's aggressive, right? Somebody talked about top down, imposing order, setting rules and laws, and anyways, I what was your question again, Rick? Can you rephrase it again or restate it, Paul? You said, what is a...
How do we know when community is good?
Okay, there you go. Thank you. That's what provoked that. I'm going to say that's not a good community, even though at a surface level, it does seem good. And these people seem to believe it's good. But I would say those people probably still need to meet this guy. They don't understand this guy. Would be my argument.
One of the interesting questions is, because actually white is not an ethne. White is a phenotype.
They think it is.
Oh, they think it is. I know. But a question for a community like that would be, okay, we talked about this vertical element. What is the vertical element that holds that together? Because it's communities are born of something that perhaps we could say is akin to gravity. Something is drawing the people together, and it's not always easy to know what is exactly drawing the people together. And it's often not the case that if you would ask the different particular individuals participating in that community, that they would agree on verbally, come to a verbal agreement as exactly what is drawing them together. And yet the questions are, we've had this in debate. Is there such a thing as the Star Wars community in America? Now, when we say the Star Wars community, is that different from, let's say, AARP? And is that different from, let's say, the Christian Reformed Church? So, and then you have these levels, because actually every time two people decide to marry, they form a community, and a very powerful one. And how do you, you could play with the question a little bit and ask, how do you know when a marriage is good? That puts it, sort of in a Plato's Republic. Let's look at a small case. How do you know when a marriage is good?
I don't think you can know. I think that would be the short answer. I think it's because suspect it smuggles in slightly a sort of substance ontology, knowing, concrete. So I think you can. The inhabiting part is kind of where I think you can only maybe feel into it, right? You need to embed yourself in the community and see the complexity in it. I don't think you can really know per se. I recently, this year, I became Catholic. So I went through OACA.
You're Dominican. Haven't you always been Catholic?
No, not really. I was baptized Catholic, but in my early years, I was Methodist, and then left the church. We moved to Georgia. Didn't find a new church when I was 13, and never went back until 15 years later. So, but why did I choose that? I was in Georgia, right? Could have easily
Easier to find a Methodist church in Georgia than a Catholic church.
Right. So that was a question I was grappling with, as you know, part of it was multiple reasons for it, some better than others. Part of it was horizontal community. Dominican. It rehomes me to my ancestors, deep ancestors back to Spain, for example. I don't think that's the best reason. So I think in some ways, sometimes you go, those shallow reasons guide you until you get to the deep vertical reasons, right? So I came into the Catholic Church last year in August and got catechized, and I went in there with my own, like, I'm going to figure this out. Boy, was I figured out, right? And again, a lot of reasons I did it, some more shallow than others, and then there was this deeper reason, this vertical reason. And so I guess what I'm saying is I think you can have these different communities. You can have that. You can have particularity and true diversity and even shallow diversity, but as long as all the verticals agree. Does that make sense?
Can I jump in there too?
Yeah, please do.
I think it's not possible to answer the question, what is a good community? Because it requires the definition of two words, which is community and good. Now, we've already kind of touched on that with saying, what do you mean by community? Like, here's a community, you know, what are all these different, what is it that makes them all communities or not communities? That, I think, is relatively simple, and you could probably have a pretty good working definition of community. I mean, I won't attempt it here, but I think we could come up with, you know, what's the broadest definition we could have of community, or do we want to limit it for this discussion? But I think the toughie is the word good. What is a good community? And I'm in education, and I studied education, and Plato defines, he talks about education, and he defines it as friends in pursuit of the good. Okay, that's how he describes education. In his time and in his school, that's what he defined it as. Friends in pursuit of the good. So the thing that binds you together is both of you pursuing the good. Well, later on, people will ask me, oh, you're studying education. And I start with the first question. What is education? Okay, that's taking children or people from this place to this place. Something has to change to say you have educated this person. And it has to change for most societies towards something that you consider better. Right? You can educate somebody into bad things, but often we say it's taking a child or a person from one place, moving to something that is better, from a child that is ignorant to a child that is knowledgeable, child that is foolish to an adult that is wise, whatever it is you want to define it as. But that's the crux, because when you talk to most people, they will say, what's education? Well, you know, that's going to school and learning your alphabet and learning math and then getting a good, you know, getting qualified to get a good job. And if that's your definition of education, great. How about the definition of good? Right? And that's, of course, stumps most people. But the problem is, if you can't define what is good, or as Socrates would say, what is the good life, then what are you educating these children towards if you have no clue of what the good life is, other than a very superficial consensus, a very, very broad, even like how we might say of community, and you know, so it stumps most teachers because they don't want to go any deeper than the superficial. So I think we get stuck with a question like, what is a good community? Because unfortunately, it requires that whole discussion about, well, why is anything good? And then how is that specific into community? In other words, and it kind of brings it back to what Mark was saying, like, what is that community oriented towards that makes its connections, makes it feel like it is a worthwhile and preservable community, even if it's not an articulated goal? What is it that binds that group together? That is their good. So you have to really, you're evaluating exactly as Mark did, the good towards which that community is oriented, right? Not just whether it meets the definition of community, but whether it is a good community. And that brings in a whole lot of discussion about what is good, what is a good life, what is a good human being, what are good relationships, and then you can judge, if you want to judge, whether that community is in any way compatible with your or the consensus idea of the good, right? And versions of it that are acceptable. Because I think that's the second thing too. Even if you within us, the six of us within our discussion of what is the good, the ultimate good, even if it's just on a political level and what is a good society, like Plato would say, but then how far can people diverge? What is the metric? How far can they go before we say, well, no, that's not really good anymore, right? And then, of course, by default, that's a bad or good community or less good community. So I'm just throwing that in there because I think it's something that everybody gets bogged down in, and we would too. And not everybody can answer that question. And maybe none of us have answered that question. But the whole point of conversation, I think in many cases, is to just draw closer as any group, even just the six of us here, to get a consensus on that very important question that determines pretty much the evaluation of everything else. Yeah.
Did Jesus contribute to community in first century Galilee and Judea?
Say that one more time.
Did Jesus contribute to community in first century Galilee and Judea?
Absolutely. He is a socialist.
I came to bring division. I came to bring a sword, he says at one point. And he certainly seemed to. And the Apostle Paul, when he'd come to communities, places he traveled, he broke them up.
Yeah, he said, quit charging people interest. That's how he brought the sword. He said, let's start loving each other like we're supposed to. Don't let the Romans fool you.
I would say, in terms of what I was just saying, the way that Christ contributed absolutely to community in his time and for all generations following is that he gave them a very clear picture of the good, the ultimate good that caused the whole community to cohere around the pursuit of that aim to reach the good, to know God and reach the good. So absolutely created community by being the focal point of the good for a whole new group of people and a large group of people.
Would that be the Sermon on the Mount?
What does Jonathan Pajot say about every society begins with a sacrifice or it begins with a death? And I think what he began with like the perfect sacrifice. So the outflowing of that can create a good community.
And it's so interesting because as, of course, he's going to be that sacrifice, he pauses on the hill, looks down on Jerusalem and weeps and says, if only you would have let me gather you in as a hen gathers her chicks, but you would not have me. And of course, what will come will be what everybody had been seeing coming for decades, which was that the community, the Israelite community, was heading towards a revolution, which would be catastrophic. And of course, if you read what happens over the next 100, 200 years to Jerusalem, and this is where this question of community, even down to the marriage level, on one hand, we can say, well, is this marriage good? Well, it sure seems good. My wife and I, we enjoy each other. The children, our bond is secure, so the children have security in that. The home is a place of benefit, and that's true. I mean, part of the difficulty is that there's just always these fractals, if you can watch Pajot's thing. And so Jesus is such a strange story because he comes in and in many ways he blows everything up But unlike Barabbas or the Bar Kokhba rebellion or all of these rebellions that would come, the explosion that Jesus brings is down onto himself. And then, of course, Christians believe then it's because of that sacrifice that that sets into, but it's on a time scale that's so much beyond our lives. And then you get this idea of this community that lasts through centuries. And what I do now here in these few years maybe will bless the community going up into the future. And a good bit of that, to come back to the original pitch, will have to be about what I say, similar to so much of what Jesus contributed, not everything, obviously, but was what he said. And he says, I mean, if you read some of the things he says, whitewash tombs, you make your disciples twice as much, fodder for hell as you are yourself. Oh, my goodness.
I'm happy to hear Don bring up Plato and Socrates in search of truth. We can't do it just with scripture. We need philosophy. The Gospel of John, his reference to the Logos, he is steeped in Greek philosophy. Philosophy, in my mind, is very important. And your comment about what is a good society and what are the limits of it brings up the limits of free speech. And I think the Canadians have it right. I think people making a living on hate has got to be restrained. And
I'm a Canadian, so I'll respond to that.
okay, you don't like it.
Oh, no. All I was going to say is, again, the question of the good, the question of what is true and what is real. Who decides what is hate speech in Canada? Well, let me tell you, it is people who belong to the dominant mainstream political ideology, which I actually don't adhere to. So the people who are deciding on my behalf what is hate speech have a very, very narrow definition of hate speech. So they're able to put that into law and have a great deal of power over people who are expressing their opinions that they disagree with. So there are two sides to that coin too, all of which, and we've said it here before already, who decides what is hate speech, right? Again, and how do we decide that hate speech is equivalent to violence? Like, nobody has made that argument satisfactorily, in my view. So if you're saying that we need to stop hate speech because it's as bad as violent, I have not seen that proven. But if it's not, then I can only say that the opposition to bad speech is good speech if you want to be consistent with that, not using legal pressures to shut people up who disagree with you. So that's kind of where I'm coming from for that. As a Canadian, living in the education system and seeing the full weight of that in our education of children, which has become so ideologically, entrapped, that although the word sounds wonderful, we don't want hate speech. What is now being defined as hate speech is so not arbitrary, but so connected to one ideological perspective that it's basically, it's counterproductive, I think.
Yeah, you have to be able to leave free will intact. Free will has to be intact. It has to be invitational, or else once it's coercive, it ceases to be good. At least that's maybe one definition of not good. If it's coercive and non-invitational, then you immediately end up you're in the realm of tyranny, and you're gaming the system. If you're gaming the system, you're gaming, to use a Vervaekian term, the transjective, right? Controlling the frames and using it as an idol in order to seek power, and not preserving I think, free will. And I think that's what Jesus did, right? He did so perfectly. He perfectly embodied, to my view, paradox. He sat in the tension, the center of the cross, and he preserved free will in the invitation. So yeah, that's kind of, I'm in total agreement with Don there, I guess I would say.
All right, we're going to go into the summation round, and then I'm going to drop the link. And so I do this now because I want to thank each of you for volunteering. And again, for those of you who joined later, but people always ask, how do I get in on these things? How do I get to pitch? How do I get to point? How do I get to play? Well, if you're in the membership, and there might still be some around because we've got 94 people watching on YouTube, and 105 free memberships were given today. So anybody who wanted one should have been able to get one. Just towards the end of the week, if I have time on Friday to do these live streams, I drop a post that's a little harder to see on YouTube. I drop a post with a little sign up that you can sign your name and your Gmail, and off we go. So, and so I want to thank all of you who signed up today. And after I drop the link, you're free to go. You've given me an hour and 3/4 of your time, and perhaps that's more than I'm worth. I don't know, but I really appreciate you coming in and sharing yourself and sharing your thoughts. And I'll drop the link, and then others, either from the fresh water or the salty water, depending on how you categorize those, can come in, and they tend to have thoughts. So we'll see what they think. So final thoughts, anyone?
I find it interesting. It was a good conversation. Thank you, everybody. Let's keep it up. I find it interesting, Don's first statement that we want to create a good community. We have to define what's good, and then what are the limits. I think the limits of saying that, Democrats hate our country is a bad limit. The problem that I find is Christians who promote hate, which to me has it upside down. So I think there should be limits to free speech. And that's what I think.
All right. Thank you, Rick. Any other closing thoughts?
Well, I'll push back a little bit on Rick with my closing thought. Rick knows I love him. And there is back to Paul again, the apostle. There's a passage in 1 Corinthians 6 where he's talking about they are taking each other to law, to secular courts to settle disputes. And his response is, to have lawsuits at all with one another is already a defeat for you. So whether you win, you've already lost spiritually. Why not rather suffer wrong? Why not rather be defrauded? And that seems to be, now that's a message to a Christian community. And he's trying to shape them into a good community. And we aren't orienting ourselves as Christians enough in that message, I think. I just think we would be much more effective. We would be brighter lights within this toxic political age if we were more like that, instead of fighting like hell to have ours and be heard and not lose out. Because back to what Paul was saying about the passage in Galatians 5 that precedes the fruit of the Spirit, it's a list very much worth listening to. because that's the list where he actually says it has fan favorites like no adultery, no sexual immorality, and so on. But then it includes things like dissension and striving. And go back to that list. Read Galatians 5. Do anything today if you're a Christian, read Galatians 5 again. And then consider that humility that Paul is talking about in 1 Corinthians to that list in Galatians 5. And the list of what is the fruit of the Spirit versus what are the behaviors that result in the that do not inherit the kingdom of God, is how he phrases it. So that's my final bit.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Anyone else?
Yeah, just say, oh, go ahead, Don.
I was just very quickly going to say, I love what Mark just said of that beautiful example of sort of what we're talking about, community determined by that beautiful outline of the good in Christ and the fruit of the Spirit, which is a beautiful community, as you said, at least to us Christian people. So thank you for that, for ending us with that lovely picture of community. And thank you to everybody. It's really lovely to meet you, and I hope we get to chat again.
Back
Same
at
here.
you, Don.
Yeah, I love that line there about it's better to suffer a wrong than to go to court and prove. And it just makes me think again of Facebook as a place where people are just going to be proved right. Everyone's putting their little post up. That's their closing argument that just seals the deal. And I am so right in this. And it's not a place where people just kind of gladly suffer being wrong. So yeah, that's my final thought.
All right. Thank you, Jason. Ranfy, you got a final thought?
Yeah, I want to thank everybody. I think I would add, it makes me think of what Mark said. Makes me think of the spirit of accusation and division, and how you don't want to necessarily let that spirit, let that temptation. You want to fight that temptation, and I think that's where you take it onto yourself. So I think that's a good way, good place to finish. And I appreciate you saying that, Mark.
All right. Thank you. Before I let the masses in, so I've been my guilty pleasure over the summer is reading The Pacific War by Ian Toll again. I read it about 3 years ago, and I don't know why I like that stuff, but I do find the case study of World War II Japan a super interesting one, because they have so many of the qualities that both sides selectively are sort of grasping to. On one hand, they've got racial purity, they've got religion, they've got embodiment in the emperor, they've got national spirit, and they very much control free speech. And it's an interesting study in terms of how that regime does in the war. And it's an absolute catastrophe, because by 1943, it was very evident they were going to lose this war. There was no question that was coming. And, could they have, in 1943, could they have found terms with the United States, even though FDR had said unconditional surrender in that address in December of 1941? Hard to know. Again, these counterfactuals are always difficult, but what's very clear is that the leadership and the way everything in their society was constructed bound them into just an absolutely catastrophic path of events that eventually wound up in, the United States destroying 2 cities with 2 nuclear weapons. But then what happens after that is also amazing, in that you would imagine that after nuking 2 of their cities, after firebombing Tokyo, after completely humiliating and destroying their nation, that the Japanese would, from that time forth forevermore be our mortal enemies, when they're fearing the coming of American troops off the ships because they were just all prepared by their very constricted speech and very constricted press to expect monsters coming off the boats. And these American soldiers were coming handing out rice and candy bars and not raping the women. And, and that turned then into a relationship and a situation where, I mean, up until now, at least with the fear of China, Japan has, they haven't gone with nuclear proliferation. They are still very ethnically isolated. They talk about not allowing immigration. They don't allow immigration. They believe in ethnic purity. And so, looking at these real life examples helps us to say, what can I learn from this? And maybe, what can we know? So again, thank you all. I am going to let in those who have gathered so far, and we will hear what they have to say in the order that they came in. Kenan, Baloo, welcome.
Thanks.
Thanks for coming in. What are your thoughts?
I missed the beginning of the conversation, but I heard someone ask the question, like, how do we find hate? Something like that. And something I've been thinking about this week, if you've been raised to believe that the true you is the spirit, the emotions, that your body is just kind of in the way, but you're really living somewhere else, then if someone attacks your emotions, that is violence. And I think what I see now is the kind of religious war that were happening is between people who ultimately believe that the physical is intimately involved in reality and those that believe that that's just kind of immaterial, so to say. And so if you believe that, then yeah, if someone does something that hurts your emotions, that's the same as someone who came and hurt your body. And I think, I don't know how to bridge that gap, but it's not, you can't just argue against each other. I guess that's a thought I've had.
Yeah. There's a deep irony in our materialist society that the definition of violence has transcended materiality. I always find that to be so ironic, because it's like, wait a minute, violence usually has to do with physicality and materiality. And very quickly we expanded it to include emotions, some of these things. And it's so interesting how this sort of folds out, because certainly there's a lot of me that isn't physical. And there's my reputation, there's my self-understanding, there's all of these things that aren't physical. And so, and then have a society that in some ways is so conscious about this boundary line of materiality that in this case we just sort of say, if you hurt my feelings, you've done me violence. It's like, you might have done me harm, I might hurt, but what do these words mean? It's so hard.
It does seem dangerous on all the sides to try to draw the lines too tightly, because there is just a lot of porousness in all of these definitions. This is weird stuff. And I think people who stick too hard to well, nothing you say is violence because it doesn't matter. That seems extreme, versus I say something that you don't like, that's literally violence. That also seems extreme. So something in the middle.
Right. Like fire in a crowded theater. Is that violence? He's got a gun. Is that violence? Yeah, these are hard things. So thank you, Kenan. Nathan, did you get wrenched?
Oh, I got attacked by the wrench. Is that I didn't get a wrench.
Who wrenched Nathan?
It's okay. I'm
okay. Sorry.
I believe in forgiveness. So no, don't worry.
Well, do you practice it?
Well, that's what that's what I'm saying. I forgive him.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
He's doing well, Paul. He's doing well.
Good.
By belief.
Good.
By belief,
you look
I mean
well. You do. You look pretty well. You look.
Thank you.
You look well. So, welcome.
You're looking well yourself.
There's love in his life, Paul.
She's gone.
Sorry,
now.
Nathan.
I'm gonna have to pick her up in half an hour and take her to work. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Though,
what were your thoughts?
I will say though, because I've received death threats in the past few days, so in the next 30 minutes I will be traveling outside my house so they can come and get me then. So I think a couple of pieces of information that are pretty interesting is if you look at the World Press Freedom Index, and the Freedom of Expression Index. Freedom of Expression Index is on Our World in Data. World Press Freedom Index. The US is not doing too good compared to other places like the UK. And I think that some of the things, some of the ideas or feelings that people in the American context may be having, I believe that they are caused by the kind of manipulation of the information that people have access to. And I do think that there are sort of outsider perspectives on what's going on in America, and a lot of Americans are just not really aware of the degree to which they've kind of deviated from even maybe what their own values were not a very long time ago, or what the rest of the civilized world might think are good values. So I guess I wanted to point that out to try and get people to be more reflective. Even if you kind of feel very strongly about something, just be careful the degree to which that might be a product of this kind of collective sickness that there seems to be in the US at the minute.
One of the interesting things I've noticed is whenever I go to the UK and I listen to people talk about the US, it's kind of funny because part of it is it's so hard to know these broad things. Like, I always like the pollsters, they say, is the country on the right track or the wrong track? And it's like, Zooks, if you just fell in love, everything's great. If your friend just died, everything's horrible. So I don't know. It's super hard to get a handle on these things, because whenever I go to the UK, people are like, boy, America's just pulling itself apart. And I think, I don't know. I don't know if it is. Partly because I remember, I posted some things on Twitter. I remember the 70s. I mean, when the FBI said, there were over 5 bombings a day in 1972 on average. 5 bombings a day. When's the last time we've sort of had a terrorist bombing in the United States? And
We replaced
I kind of
that.
wonder.
I was just saying we've replaced that with school shootings or mass shootings.
That's true. That's true. But it's also kind of funny that I kind of wonder. I remember listening to the Collinses make this argument that I'd never heard of, that studies have shown that societies that, Rick, I'm going to have to mute you here, Rick. I muted myself. There we go. I remember the Collinses making an argument that societies that permit pornography have lower rates of rape. And I thought, huh. And the argument is that if people sort of get to act this out in their mind, they actually act it out less on strangers. I don't know if it's true or not. And then there's arguments that people who actually, societies that actually have violent video games have lower levels of violence than societies that don't, because people sort of act it out. They kind of get that, oh, I hate these people. Here, I'm going to go up and play Call of Duty or whatever is the. So I really don't know how to judge. America has super high incarceration rates, but I think a lot of this gets into some of what we talked about before, in that if you have a society that sort of is cohesive, that sometimes helps limit, sort of the whack-a-mole approach to individual behavior. And I would imagine that in some ways, World War II Japanese society had very low crime rates, but their violence was expressed in other ways. Like when people were like coming into the army, they would regularly be beaten by soldiers. And it's like, what's with that? So, figuring out these global things, I don't know. I don't know. I just have a lot of questions about the whole thing. So I don't know, but I appreciate what you pointed out, because I hear stories of, people getting arrested in the UK for putting stuff on Twitter and Facebook. And I don't know what to think. I don't know who these people are. I don't know what it means to get arrested. I mean, is it like getting a ticket if I drive too fast? I just have no idea. So I don't know. Alan, what do you have to say? Should we just let him talk while he's muted? I think we should. It's just so nice the way he moves his mouth. He's got a girlfriend too, so from what I hear. Does she still like you?
Yeah, well, we're still doing it. We're still, still together. We're still going steady. Is that what the kids called this day? Going steady.
That's right. What say you, Alan?
Yeah, I guess it's plugged in a little bit with the point you just made, PBK, is just like, especially when it comes to community, like, I think it's very important to just have a level of humility, because it's like we're having these big debates over like, this is what society should do, and then this is coming from people who are like, well, what's your community look like? Well, I don't have any friends and I don't know anybody, and everyone who meets me hates me. It's like, okay, I don't know about that. I mean, you even have people online who sort of like, I'm a troll. I live in my mom's basement. I react to things. I do this, I do that. But I'm gonna, I've garnered some wisdom as a truth teller, which maybe could be like the hermit, archetype or something of like the outsider who's the truth teller. But there are a lot of people, tons of people who are just gamers in their mom's basement drinking Mountain Dew. They can't all be the wise hermit. But just like pointing back to just like there's something very, when you try and do things, you realize how hard doing anything, even in your own life, is. Like, just to use comedy as an example, it's like, it always makes me laugh that like people who are really smart and lawyers and doctors and businessmen I've met doing comedy, and they get up on stage and they bomb. They suck, and it's just like, you went to law school, you went to medical school, like, these people hate you, and like, it's like, you think, well, you can't even construct, 5 minutes of talking, whereas someone who works at Burger King is crushing and everyone's laughing at his jokes. So, you might think you're wise and some lawyer, businessman, doctor, but like, when it comes to trying to do something, you can't even be a comedian. So just not to like steer away dialogue, because I enjoy the dialogues, but just like, this is the idea of like, well, this is what all of Europe should do. It's like, well, who are you to say what all of you? This is what Japan should do. And it's just like, this is crazy. Just, maybe like figure out a way to. I'm not saying we don't care about these things, but it's just say like, how do you enact this in a way where you're actually being effective? How do you actually do any of this stuff?
It was fun. So I lived, Ranfy has me thinking about the Dominican Republic. I lived in the Dominican Republic. The power would go on and off. The water would go on and off. I worked with Haitians, and Haitians had it rough there in a way that people in America don't understand, because they needed to get around on public transit. And I remember, intervening where a Haitian basically got shaken down by a soldier and his camera got taken away. And then the commander of the base, because I was an American who came in and sort of represented turning up the heat at the behest of some other Haitian pastors, told me about, so the soldier admitted that he took the camera from the Haitian. And then before that, the commander had said, and if anybody steps forward and acknowledges that they did this, it'll go better with you. So the guy steps forward and admits he does it. And the commander looks to me and says, I don't care what I said. I'm going to turn the screws on him, just to sort of get me in his favor. And I'm like, I'm not sure you're helping, my impression of what's going on here. And so you could point to all of these things in the Dominican Republic and say, it's failing, it's failing, it's failing. But you know what I got to do in the Dominican Republic? I got to pet a baby rhino. Well, why? You'd think, boy, what an awesome thing to pet a baby rhino. Because I went to the Santo Domingo Zoo, and the whole place was so chill. In America, we just got all these rules around. You can't do this, you can't do that. The Dominican Republic, you can kind of walk in and we wait because there's a rhino at the zoo, like a white rhino. I walked right up to that sucker and pet him. Was that a smart thing? I don't know, but he seemed okay with it. And so it's just, and there was some freedom that we enjoyed in the Dominican Republic. There was the food, the conviviality, And, I've seen that so often with immigrants that, they came to this country and, they're making more money and they enjoy so many of the things in this country. But then when they talk about the country that they left, they're just like, oh, I so miss. I mean, they come from places like Fiji and Samoa, and Americans are like, we want a vacation there. And they came here and they go back there. And I remember one pastor telling me, I bring my kids back to Samoa, and Samoa's like the Garden of Eden. You walk out, you wake up in the morning, you pull a papaya from the tree and you eat it, and it's fresh and it's glorious. And my kids want to eat breakfast cereal when I go there. And so it's like, was it good to come to America? They're staying here. They're still here. Their kids get an education. I mean, it's just so hard. And again, sort of with the story of Christ, well, they brutalized and killed this man. Was that a good thing? His disciples certainly didn't think so at the time. But we are so full of thinking that we know stuff, and we're so small. Anyway, so thank you, Alan. Oh, Rick's still monkeying with his stuff. Are we all done? Or is there something else that someone want to say? Otherwise, I'll land the
Just
plane.
one thing based on your story, PVK. I was in a Uber and some guy was saying like, oh, I drive Uber here, but I'm from Burkina Faso. And I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, my wife and kids are back in Burkina, in Africa. And I was like, oh, so you want to have them come over with you? And he's like, no, not until they're older. I want them to be raised in a good country.
That's exactly right.
Which I thought was so funny.
Yeah. And you find this with people all the time, especially immigrants, because immigration it's a heck of a thing. And especially if you have a community. I mean, Ranfy knows that. I mean, it's such, and then you've got ties, everything here is Nueva York. And I was in the DR during Visa para Sueño. Sam E. Oh, I let you even before I saw your face. Look at that. I guess nobody's impersonating Sammy. Sammy, what do you have to say for yourself?
Oh. What do I have to say for myself?
Yeah, what do you have to say for yourself? What would you like to say to us?
Oh, well, anyone in the Detroit area, come to Estuary on Sunday evening. But besides that, listen to the conversation.
You live in Detroit? I thought Detroit was a hellish hellhole.
Well, Detroit area, though, I have lived in the city before, so it has its hellish elements. We do worship Satan here, so, but I'm joking. But there actually is like this whole thing about the ruse. You should look it up if you don't know what it is. But anyways, no, I've been thinking about this and thinking about it in connection to the Sermon on the Mount, which, my channel, we've been reading Bonhoeffer, and a big section of that is on the Sermon on the Mount. And the Sermon on the Mount is really fascinating because it's not strictly speaking prescriptive in the way like a lot of the epistles are, but it's also not purely aspirational. And one of the big takeaways is that Christ in it, he way more seriously than I think most.
Oh, Sam, your internet is
failing.
I'm back. Tell us your provider so we'll all know not to use that one.
Okay. I think I'll pass on that, but no, but the Sermon on the Mount, I think about it, and Christ takes language, but also conflict way more seriously than I think almost any modern Christians do in it. And I think of the passage where, it's not technically about communion because it's before the ascension, but it's if you have conflict with your brother, leave your sacrifice at the altar and go and find your brother or your sister and then give the sacrifice. It doesn't even imply that the person necessarily did anything wrong, is one of the most fascinating parts. Actually, I looked up today and it actually says if they have conflict with you, And gosh, yeah, I think about that, and I don't know. I guess our world is so broken in so many ways, but I don't know. I guess I join with Christ maybe in praying that at least for the community, for those who follow him, that we can be one. And I don't know how well we do that, but I think there's at least one minister who's a little bit goofy. He claims he's uh, related to the Marx Brothers in California, who I watch online, and he does a pretty good job, I think, of modeling that.
Wow.
So
thank you. All right.
I'll step out with
Sunday night estuary. How can they find your estuary if they're in Detroit area?
Oh yes, it is. Yes, it is on Meetup, and it will be at 5 o'clock at Six Spokes Brewing, which is a newish place. If you're in the area and you're like, "Where's that?" It's in Corktown, next to Cork and Gable, and near the train station. If that kind of gives people an idea.
All right, bring asbestos, because of course we know Detroit is a hellhole.
Real quick, can I just respond to Sam?
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
It's really interesting. Christ is saying that in a very, at a very unliberal time in human history. I mean, Rome was we all know Tom Holland has done this deep dive and it's explaining how the world of antiquity, a man's honor was everything, and if he felt that violated, it was a kind of public castration. So to that, the level of sacrifice that you're suggesting that Jesus is requesting of his followers is more extraordinary even than in our time, and it's extraordinary in our time.
Kenneth Bailey, who writes a lot of the stuff I like in the New Testament, he was teaching New Testament at the American University of Beirut during the Lebanese Civil War. And his students, in reading these things in the Gospels, understanding, the degrees of the culture, they were just astounded. They said, how did this guy last 3 years? I mean, and you see many attempts on Jesus' life throughout the Gospels, because it was just such a hot and bloody time. And yeah, one of the things, well, anyway, maybe I'll do that in a regular video. Eddie Cornwell, I don't know if I've seen your name. Are you coming out of the lurk here, Eddie?
Yeah. I'm a big fan.
All right, well, welcome.
Thank you. So I guess I'll keep this short since y'all are trying to close up. Y'all were talking about like, how do you judge whether like a marriage is good or like a community, and somebody said like that's impossible to do. I found that a little bit annoying. Obviously, in a final sense, that's impossible. But it actually reminded me of two things, that whole conversation. First, of Christ talking about judging a tree by its fruits, and then secondarily, it made me think of John Vervaeke talking about the real, and how it's comparative to less and more real things. And so, like, you if you look at a family in a vacuum, yeah, it's more or less impossible to determine its value. But like, you compare one family where their kids are perpetually sequestered in their rooms, online all day, having no relationship to their parents, and you compare that to another family where they're not doing that, where they're more engaged. Like, that's a pretty obvious, cut and dry, better thing to me. And you can expand that to cultures, and you could go down to marriages, like how much a couple is having loving dialogue, for instance. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And
forgive me if y'all already said all this. I've been a little bit in and out because I'm at work.
I'm glad you came in, and Tayo likes you already, he said, so that's good. But you remind me of the opening line to Anna Karenina, one of Tolstoy's great novels. All happy families are alike. each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way.
Mm.
And that line, it recognizes something. And again, I think it gets at what Ranfy was talking about with there's a power to vertical orientation and alignment, and that power that's an incredible power. But I think part of my Japanese element is, well, they certainly had vertical orientation, but if it isn't right, I mean, it can go bad. So
Yeah, and
right, like you could be unified by fear or anger rather than love, right?
yeah, and we see that in
And
other countries. Go
I
ahead.
think you could see that in like the fruits of whatever body is being unified by that spirit.
Yeah, that's right. Ranfy, you wanted to say something.
yeah, I was gonna respond to Eddie because I said that, and and I, in some ways, I laughed because he's right. Like I appreciate him saying that because it's true. So it's one of those I couldn't get to that because I was inhabiting a certain perspective at the time. But Eddie's absolutely right. He's absolutely right. You can notice things. There is a proper way. There are things. I was not being a relativist, but so I appreciate that, Eddie. I think you're right.
Nathan, you're skeptical about Tolstoy's line. Tell me more about that.
Well, I think it's a grammatical artifact, right? It's kind of like the sentence or the question, is to sleep active or passive, right? Because sleeping is a passive thing, but the verb is grammatically active. And so you're like, well, is it active or is it passive? And you get kind of caught between the two, but there's not. And the similarity is that, you're saying they're all the same. They're the same in virtue of their dissimilarity, which catches you in a tension between what the meanings of these words might be in one sense, but that you can use the words in these two different senses, and then they're not in tension with one another. And I mean, in a sense, there's something deep about that, because you kind of go like, oh, that's interesting. Like you might do if someone has a way to solve a Rubik's Cube very quick. You might go, oh, that's weird. How did you do that? But there's not like something we should order our lives around as a result of that being interesting. I don't think. Like I don't think I should like change my life because someone can do like a trick with a Rubik's Cube,
Well, I think I'll just say it again. All happy families are alike. Each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. I think what that gets at is, I look at churches sometimes, and I'm a church visitor sometimes. And when you walk into a church that's like a happy family, you can sort of feel it. People are happy to be there. It's a high trust environment. I think that might be some of what's getting at. It's a high trust environment. There's a commonality and a similarity to that. But then when I look at unhappy marriages, churches, families, communities, this is what gets into like diabolos. It's just, it can't hold together, and they can't seem to accomplish anything, because everything they try, there's a but, and they almost can't do anything except, I think, as Eddie said, they can all be afraid together and they can all be angry together, but they can't sort of be together in a way. So I think he's getting at something, but I appreciate what you're saying, in that it's this is part of the reason that it's such a debated line. And if you just Google, the first line of Anna Karenina, you'll see, what does this mean? It's sort of like a koan. I mean,
yeah,
it reminds me of Christ talking about the way being narrow and the way of sin being broad.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there's a similarity to that too. So.
I do appreciate you trying to bring me in on that, but I do think that you're sort of like, maybe, the way that you're interpreting what's being said there, I don't think that the reason that line is interesting is because people typically interpret it in the way that you said. I think the reason that it's interesting is because it drives this conflict between, similarity is typically a word that we use when things have things in common, but then, the play on words is to say they're similar in respect to the fact that they're unhappy in their own way. So it's dissimilarity that's being appealed to as a feature of similarity. So that is kind of like, oh, that's interesting and weird. Like, how can that be the case? And it generates a sort of puzzle. And I think that's why people like that line. I mean, I think that's what's sort of interesting about it. And I think it is more of a grammatical feature.
All right. Chad, you jumped in.
Hello. How's it going?
Good, Chad. Bathroom looks nice. Tile looks good.
Thank you. Yeah, I was thinking a couple question that I had was well, I remember the one question, but I forgot the other one, so that's great. The one question is has to do with, I guess it's more of a thought experiment. Does the devil, or whatever you want to call that, the adversary, Satan, Lucifer, whatever it is, does it suffer?
Oh.
And does it know that it suffers? Or is its unwillingness to suffer or acknowledge its suffering kind of like the Matthew Pajotian latest drop on how he talked about, he's questioning whether or not, like the Lucifer in the system versus the fallen Lucifer. And so I would say like the fallen Lucifer is the one that can't acknowledge its own suffering. So, and I think like this is like this self-righteousness, and I think we all can kind of step into that. It's probably really a relevant question, but for some reason it was calling to me to ask that question.
All right. That's a good question. I don't know, because I'm not the devil, but I think, I mean, it gets into that question about that very interesting dynamic when someone says something or does something that I feel hurt from, and that instinctive reaction that I have, even if I'm not thinking about the fact that what I really want to do and what it seems like I want to do is hurt the other. Because, I think with the Charlie Kirk assassination, that has brought a lot of that, and the lines between people, even let's say within their own families, it all just sort of gets inflamed. People are saying things like, I'm just annoyed that other people are celebrating him as if he's a good guy. And it's like, well, that's interesting. And then you get this defensiveness that just keeps piling on.
Yeah.
Even when probably people, all they know is a reputation and maybe some little TikTok or YouTube shorts or even a long conversation or another, where we sort of locate this person on our mental map of good guys versus bad guys. And then, again, via therapy, you might sit down and say, okay, well, why does this group of people saying this about this death, why do you, what's going on in you that you feel this way? Because lots and lots of people died this week. Some of those you might have heard of. When you read the obituaries, do you get triggered? So does the devil suffer? My quick answer would be yes. And it is, in fact, his suffering that makes him so dangerous. And I think that's true often of many of us. So it's an interesting question.
It
Chad.
occurs to me that that suffering can also mean like losing your agency, right?
Yeah.
And so the rebellious Satan would be the one unwilling to accept not having full agency.
Yeah. Jacob,
I'm
chamomile tea.
going to get back to work. I appreciate you guys.
All right. Thank you, Eddie. Thanks for coming on. Jacob, what say you?
Good question, Paul. Paul. Do I like sound okay? Is that working?
Sound great.
Okay, good. Yeah, been a hard week for me watching all the news. I have a political blog and I've blogged for, I don't know, 15 years and occasionally participate in our country's politics. So maybe I just felt a little stronger than most about, you know, what happened this week. Struck a little closer to home. I also have a new kid, 6 months old, and you know, thinking about Charlie's children going to bed without him 2 nights ago. It was very hard, and then being in the tumult of all this like political commentary coming out of it, where people, you know, it's far from unanimous about whether or not this was a bad thing or a completely bad thing, because of what he stood for. It just kind of I feel a little adrift and strung out, and I know I'll recover from it, but it's been hard to watch, hard to be part of, hard to, you know, my wife went to a book club at the library with a bunch of liberal boomers, and they were commenting about how happy they were about Charlie getting shot. And you know, that's not the internet, that's not anything. So I mean, the world's never been a great place, and you know, it's always had its perversity and evil, and maybe I feel like it's a little more evil than maybe in the 90s when I kind of set my expectations. So maybe I'm feeling bad about that, but if I think on the longer term view, I get a little bit of comfort. I'm like, oh well, there's always been civil strife, including much worse than we have it now, and I'm trying to find like a reaction in myself that's other than, you know, want to punch the guys punched me. I felt the same way when Trump was shot. I'm like, I wanted to find out who wanted that to happen and punch him, but I can't punch 1 million people. I can't punch 100 million people, and that energy, I'm very much aware that if I listed out all my grievances with the American left, then they would list out all their grievances with the American right, and you have this cycle of violence and retribution. And I'm trying to figure out how to come at something better, and it has something to do with definitely religion, spirituality, sacrifice, the cross. There's something in there that's a different answer than punch the other guy back. And now I absolutely do believe that, you know, the law should act, and we need to you know, hunt down radical groups and the law should do its job to de-radicalize and nip things in the bud to the extent that it can, and it has some capability to do that. But as far as like factions fighting each other in society, I live near Gettysburg, and my wife is she was a big historical dance person. She liked to go to Civil War dances, and she got me into it. And it was kind of hard for me to go to at first, just because I grew up in the South. I was born in the North. I don't know, but I had listening to the you know, in history class we would talk about the American Revolution. And then a month later, like the Civil War, and I kind of had a lot of sympathy for the Southern guys. I'm like, yeah, I don't know, like their system was evil, but there's something about self-determination and stuff that, you know, I understood that too. Like the spirit of the American Revolution was appealed to by the South. And but after the Civil War, you know, not everybody accepted there was some disturbance, but at least among the more elite set, like people like Lee, there was this idea that they needed to bury the hatchet and move on, and sort of like, and you saw this at Gettysburg. Within the lifetime of the veterans, they actually had a reenactment of Gettysburg with the veterans 50 years after the battle. And for the most part, it was a catharsis and a coming together. They tried to reenact the battle, and they weren't sure how that was going to go, but it was interrupted by like veterans from the opposite sides running, and, like hugging each other and weeping, and there was a sense of that they had been part of this great sacrifice, and that the new nation was composed of both sides. And that was a mythology people worked for. I mean, it could have went a different way. And for some people, it did go a different way, the lost cause ideology and all this. But come about 1914 or 1917, when America got involved in World War I, that's that was there was one particular town in Virginia that stopped saying the pledge, stopped singing this, stopped celebrating the 4th of July during the Civil War. And in 1917, when America went to war in Europe, they started celebrating the 4th of July again. And there was this idea that that sacrifice was enough, and that people should come together again. And I don't know where I'm going with this, but there's something about someone that I related to took a shot this week and was killed, but maybe that should be enough. And that should be, he died in a good way. And maybe we should let that be an example of how to live, and not punch the other guy back. I don't know. I'm wrestling with that because I really like punching people, and but it ain't the right thing to do.
I've been reading around Tolstoy, and there's a 99-cent book on Amazon with a brief biography of Tolstoy and a bunch of his writings, because it's all in public domain. And one of the things that Tolstoy, of course, was, he was in the army during the Crimean War. Tolstoy was a rather high nobility in Russia. They had a very exalted place at the time. But, part of what he saw in Crimea was, before the Crimean War, there's all these reasons why Russia needs to go and fight. I mean, and the country's just pumping up all of these reasons. And Tolstoy just, he just, at some point, he just doesn't buy it anymore. When some 500,000 men had perished, around 340 million pounds had been spent. Those who governed said it was time to stop. They forgot about all the oppressed nationalities, but bargained about the number and the kind of ships Russia might have on the Black Sea. And, there's a reason Tolstoy, that he was, up until so I'm reading this other much more detailed biography about him. And really up until he sort of goes to war, he's just a playboy. He's looking how many girls he can shag. He's just got constant problems with gonorrhea, and this'll turn your mind cold. The treatment of gonorrhea before antibiotics was they used to inject mercury up your pecker, and it's like, good grief. But he's living this totally dissolute life. And then he goes to Crimea. His brother has been in the military for a while. The nobility have this sense of noblesse oblige, service. They're all speaking French because of, Napoleon. I mean, it's just it's a different world. But he goes there and he sees all of this rousing reasons why Crimea needs to be taken. And then in the end, it's like, and I mean, and similar things happen because of Vietnam, of course, because before Vietnam, we've got to stop communism, and Vietnam's about communism. And of course, Rick knows this because that's what Rick lived. And then suddenly it's like, what was this war really about? And then for those who fought in it, and same with the Second World, I mean, wars are these massive exorcisms that change everything because of these massive sacrifices. And yeah.
Are we in a war?
Well, this is a question because, what is a war? And I praise God that we don't have I praise God that we don't have the war fought by radical revolutionaries of 1972, bombing almost 2,000 buildings in 1 year. And I was 9 years old in 1972, and everything seemed okay. Our ability to figure out this life is grossly limited. And, Grizz was talking about the power of set. Obviously part of what changed Vietnam was television. And, even, a long time after Vietnam, can we actually get our head around that? Those who went to fight in Iraq and Afghanistan, can they get their heads around that? So, any of us. Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Another way of answering that question, are we at war, would be to say, are we at peace? Yeah. And Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers. And now we're back to the self-control business. The church needs to be on the forefront of peacemaking, even when we want to be at war. I think this is where it's really the message I'm getting from this moment is really have to double down on self-control. And it's funny, the fruit of the Spirit, you think the image I have in my mind is they grow up as a cluster. You have all these characteristics of joy, peace, patience, long suffering. I can never remember kindness. The list always escapes me when I never get it perfectly in my head. But anyway, but then self-control. But I think you must express the self-control while not losing your joy. So you can't just be a bitter self-controlled person. You must be a joyful and self-controlled person. That's the fruit. And be that in the presence of a world that is not at peace. And that's the church being the church, and that's the great challenge for us in our time. So yes, Chad, take it over. Hand off. I thought he was going to say something.
It's really well put, Mark.
Thank you.
But also, when I read the Sermon on the Mount, I'm like, oh, this is impossible. And it's kind of frustrating that what you said just sounds very hard. Saints do that, but I don't know. Am I supposed to do that? Am I supposed to have self-control and joy in the middle of turmoil and strife? Sounds hard. Sounds like you're expecting a lot of me.
Yeah.
I don't say I'm doing it perfect, man. And I have my moments. And then Paul what was a couple weeks ago? Paul was like going, I had Paul so upset. He was on a live stream. Every 3 months, Mark Parker gets upset with the corner. And I was.
That's true. Well, Chad's trying to get in here too. Chad, I've got 2 Chads now. Okay, this is the real Chad. That's how we are. And so that's why I wasn't upset. I mean, I work in a church. This is what happens in church too. Every now
You
and then.
didn't look very happy with me, Paul.
Oh, Mark, I love you, man. I love you. Every few months, someone gets a bee in their bonnet about something in a church and goes on a tear. And the rest of us are like, did your mom and your dad do that at some point? So yeah. Rick, I mentioned Vietnam. I don't know if you have something you want to say about that.
I'm amazed that I survived. It was horrific, and I would never recommend war as a solution. It was horrible, and I lost my connection about a half an hour ago. I had to figure it all out, and that's happened before with my iPad. And that's it.
All right. Chad, I know you're frozen. How many Chads do I have here? I have 1 frozen Chad, not even a hanging Chad, just a frozen Chad. And now we lost the frozen Chad. We'll give him a minute to get in. So yeah, I think at some point, I really recommend take a break from the screens if you can. And I don't mean to say, the news doesn't matter, but we need to gain perspective. And part of what's so difficult is these screens, they can just hold you, and they're just crazy making. And go out, touch grass, hug your wife, kiss your child, sit down and have coffee with your neighbor, talk about something other than what's on set. Go ahead, Chad.
I don't know what's happening with this. They don't want me to hear it, or they don't want me to talk. Well, they are. But,
They're stifling Chad.
Well, the like I said in the comments. I mean, I'm assuming that Jacob is very close to. Also, congratulations, Jacob. I do have a 6-month-old.
Right
She's
back at
so
you. Right back
She's
at
so
you.
precious.
I've seen your daughter around.
And, our whole lives, I suspect. Well, I know my whole life. The narrative of revolution was bandied about.
I wish I knew what Chad was going to say.
Well, it's interesting. And part of what's been lovely about the corner is being an old boomer like myself. I'm a young boomer, but I am a boomer. Different generations have been subject to different educational regimes and different societal regimes and different technological regimes. I mean, Mark and Rick and I and Dawn, we were all formed not by the internet. The internet came along relatively late in life for us. And, we were formed by the pre-1970s world. And so by set back in those days, and by all of our individual church experiences and all the other experiences. So I learn a lot by listening to some of you who have been the products of the educational regime that my generation has had a hand in building. So, and for that, I apologize to the degree that I can apologize for something I haven't actually done personally. But anyway, I think the revolution is a hard, disgusting proposition, and we have no clue what that I think entails. He meant I was formed by Seinfeld. All right, I am going to land the plane, but thank you all again. Special thanks to the original. Don, do you have anything you want to say? You were hanging in there, and
nope, just listening in. I already said my last thing, so that's good.
Oh gosh, and I gotta say, I know. On one hand, I'm a Calvinist, so I've got a dark perspective on human nature, but I also have seen so much goodness and so much. There are things that differ with us. We have different perspectives, we have different religions, and I loved it in the Tom Holland thing where the guy said, "Aren't we all the same?" And Tom says, "No, we're not." And that's true, we're not. But I have been richly blessed by so many of you, and that's why some of you might not like Rick's panentheism, you might not like his politics, but I would recommend that you go to Mark D. Parker's channel and you listen to their conversation, and you listen to Rick's life and what formed him and what made him. And we might disagree with each other's politics, but Rick didn't suffer all that he's suffered and not leave with some wisdom. And so learn from that wisdom. I mean, and that's in many ways part of the acquisition of wisdom is gaining wisdom and how we acquire it. We don't just take wholesale what, people are giving us. And the more we can understand about them, the more we can understand how in their context and in their life, how they're blessing us. And so then we figure out how to receive that blessing, and then how maybe if we learn to receive that blessing, how then we can bless the world again in return. And, I was listening again to that conversation with a couple of the South Estuary speakers and just thinking about how difficult it is in this time to figure out how to bless the world with our speech. But if we can gain the skill to do that, that's a good thing. So
I just want to thank you, Paul, for what you're doing with Estuary and YouTube. And even though I disagree with a lot of your theology, I love you and what you're doing. And my project is the Second Reformation.
Oh. Tom Holland would say, there's one continuous reformation with Jesus, and it doesn't stop. We keep doing it. And it's conservative. I mean, it's a crazy thing, but thank you, Rick.
Yeah.
I'm glad in this internet world, a lot of people, when they hear something they don't like, they click away and they're gone. And maybe that's okay, because you need that. But I'm really impressed by the fact that same with you, Mark, even though there are a lot of conservatives in this corner, and there's a lot of people who poke at the boomers, but you two have shown yourself to be hardy, and I know you both are. You're hardy and you're resilient, and you've gained enough wisdom that I can deflect these words. And,
stubborn. We're just
that's
stubborn.
Right.
Resilient.
I'd really love to know the heart of that person. And even if we have differences, I'd like to figure out how we can at least be together with a degree of good community. So, all right. So thank you all. Let's see.
And don't forget, Living Stones, give a little thought, little love to Living Stones. LivingStonesCRC.com/give.
And your and your gifts have been, many people have given, and I don't have a number, but many people have given, and it makes a difference. And so I'm hoping that, while we have this facility, it's not going away, but I think we want to fix it up, and I think we want to use it there's something that churches are used for many good things, but there's something that we can use here uniquely just because of how this thing formed. And if we can sort of have some estuary groups and give a little bit of oomph to the estuary movement so that people can talk in church adjacent spaces, if our facility can be used by that in the next few years, let's see what we can do. So
love it.
All right.
Thank you, Paul.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
In other news, Ron Copperman was arrested last night after attempting to reveal secret sacred truths of the TLC to an unknown sociologist.
Hold on a second. It's the cops.
Oh, no.
Ron Copperman, minister. I set the alarm off. Oh, my God, dude. Ron Copperman. Yeah.
18A. TLC authorities have indicated that the Copper Man is being held at an undisclosed facility until he repents of his false prophecy. Back to you, Tim.
Ken knew happy, though. Great Ken knew happy, and I can rejoice about that.
Although this world will devastate you, and rejoice although this world will penetrate you, and rejoice although you will not survive. Rejoice you'll never make it out alive.
Excellent rehearsal, gentlemen.
And rejoice, your hair it smells like burning hair. Oh, rejoice, your nails all got chewed off. Oh, rejoice, and holy fuck, you're bleeding there. Oh, rejoice, you burn your whole beard off. Rejoice despite the fact this world will hurt you. And rejoice despite the fact this world will kill you. And rejoice despite the fact this world will tear you to shreds. Rejoice because you're trying your best.
Hey, I love that one. That's gorgeous. Thank you, brother. Wait, who's that brother?
Your mom and Reggie are on the top of the world.
I had an idea.
What?
why don't you tell the fans out there that are watching in Michigan, watching in Sacramento, all over the colony.
Don't forget the ones in Ontario, Canada.
Ontario,
Some
Canada.
of our favorite fans are out there.
We love Canada. Canada. Oh, Canada, the stars are greatly smiling. Jesus loves you, Canada. All right. Now I'm going to do a little dance.
This is a first. We've never had a dance. So here it is.
I think you got to lift it up.
You think so? I think we see it pretty well.
We don't have no music though.
We don't have any music.
Okay.
I don't know what you're going to do now, Fred.
I'm just going to bust one.
Okay.
Did that, huh?
You're sure you want me to put this up on YouTube?
Yep. Ain't nothing but a G thing, baby. 916, Jesus Christ is lady. He's the man in command, don't you see me? Because Jesus Christ took me away from sin and mercy. Rock the mercy. I love you, Jesus Christ, in every way you come. We three kings of Orient are. Travel, yes, we travel afar. Fields and fountains, lords and mountains, following yonder star. Peace out. We got to do it together.
All right, here we go.
Thank you. Peace out. I, CJ.
You heard your neighbor go on about Jesus. They claim their life is renewed. You're happy for them and wonder about it, but surely that isn't for you. Well, what does it mean, and where does life lead, and what they say, could it be true? Well, open your mind, my friend, you may find that Jesus is calling you to. We hear explanations, we try to be patient, opinions the world doesn't lack. They say he's the way, have faith and be safe. It's almost as simple as that. You look for a sign, well this is the time. The answers have come into view. He wipe all your tears and cancel your fears. Well, Jesus is calling you to a strong hesitation for great invitation, a feeling we've all felt ourselves. And now we are gathered at life-giving water. It overflows out of the well. Well, he is the man and he has a plan. You're wondering what you should do. I tell you, arise, repent, be baptized, for Jesus is calling you to. Though life won't be perfect, few things will be certain. We follow with all of our hearts. We walk in the light, we can see with our eyes. We understand only in part. We pick up our cross, we don't count our loss. What else is there left to do? The way it is right, his burden is light. Yes, Jesus is calling you to. We all know there's something that's wrong with existence. The nations are warring with blame. But what if I told you a good guy, he loves you, but sin, it has kept us away. There's got to be more, and you can be sure eternity time flies into. But as your days in, you'll still have a friend when Jesus is calling you to. And when your days in, you'll still have a friend when Jesus is calling you to.
Where are you here?
Oh, there I am. Hey.
Where are you? Where?
Got me?
Oh boy. Yeah. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me.
Come on, man.
Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. All along this Jesus journey. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. Yeah.
Walk with my mama.
You walk with my mama.
Walk with me.
Walk with me too.
You walk with my mama.
Yeah.
Walk with me.
And walk with me too.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
Jesus
journey.
I want Jesus.
Want Jesus.
Walk with me.
Walk with me. Hold my hand, Lord. Hold my hand. Hold my hand, Lord. Hold my hand. All along this Jesus journey. Hold my hand, Lord. And hold my hand.
Walk with Moses.
You walk with Moses.
Walk with me.
Walk with me.
You walk with Moses. Walk with me.
Walk with me.
While I'm home.
Yeah.
Jesus
journey.
I want Jesus.
I want Jesus to walk with me.
Say, walk with me, Lord. How y'all doing? Walk with me. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me.
Walk with me.
I'm on my
Yeah, Lord.
I want Jesus.
I want Jesus
to walk with me.
To walk with me. Walk with David, a little shepherd boy. Yeah, you made him a great king. I know David shouted for joy. He walked with David, and he's a little shepherd boy. You made him a great king. And David shouted for joy.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. So walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. All along this Jesus journey. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. You gotta walk with me, Lord.
Yeah! That was rocking great, brother.
Oh, yeah.